Every night, Max, the loyal family dog, would guard little Ethan's room with an unsettling growl. It wasn't just the usual protective behavior. This time, there was something more. As Michael and Sarah began to investigate, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong in their home. What could possibly be causing Max's strange behavior? The truth, when uncovered, would leave them horrified. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. Michael watched with growing concern as Max, their usually gentle German shepherd, positioned himself beside the baby's crib once again. As evening settled over their modest home, the familiar scene played out just as it had for the past 2 weeks. Max's ears perked forward, his posture stiffened, and a low, persistent growl rumbled from his throat. "I don't understand it," Michael said quietly to his wife Sarah, who stood in the nursery doorway. Max had been part of their family for 5 years, ever since they had adopted him from the animal shelter. He'd always been the gentlest soul, especially good with the neighborhood children who would stop to pet him during their evening walks. When they brought baby Ethan home from the hospital 3 months ago, Max had been nothing but protective and gentle. He would lay quietly beside the crib during afternoon naps, his tail wagging softly whenever Ethan made a sound. But something changed 2 weeks ago, and now every night like clockwork, Max would stand guard and growl. The spring evenings were getting warmer, and Michael had thoroughly checked the nursery each time. The windows were securely latched, the screens intact, and no signs of any unwelcome visitors like mice or squirrels. Still, Max's behavior persisted, always focused on the same corner of the room, even when Ethan was sleeping peacefully. Sarah had suggested taking Max to the veterinary clinic for a checkup, wondering if he might be experiencing discomfort or anxiety that made him act this way. The examination revealed nothing unusual. Max was in perfect health for a dog his age. The veterinarian explained that dogs sometimes react to changes in their environment that humans can't detect, like subtle sounds or shifts in air pressure. Michael spent hours observing Max's behavior, noting how the dog's growling wasn't aggressive or threatening. It seemed more like a warning, similar to how he acted when he heard unusual noises outside. Max never showed any aggression toward Ethan. In fact, he positioned himself as if trying to guard the baby from something in that corner of the room. "Maybe we should have someone inspect the house," Sarah suggested one evening, after another round of Max's mysterious behavior. "Remember last fall when he kept pawing at the kitchen wall? We found out there was a pipe leaking inside." She had a point. Max's instincts had proven reliable before. The next day, Michael noticed something that made him pause. While changing Ethan's diaper, he felt a slight draft near the corner, where Max always focused his attention. It was barely noticeable, but it made the baby mobile twirl ever so slightly. Could this be what was bothering Max? Dogs were known to be sensitive to such things, and with their acute hearing, they could detect sounds far beyond human perception. As Michael prepared for bed that night, watching Max maintain his vigilant position by the crib, he made a decision. Tomorrow morning, he would call a home inspector to thoroughly examine the nursery. Something was clearly amiss, and if Max was trying to warn them, Michael was determined to find out what it was. He reached down to pat Max's head, receiving a brief tail wag in response, though the dog's eyes never left that corner. "Good boy," Michael whispered, grateful for his loyal companion's dedication to protecting their family. Whatever was causing Max's concern, they would get to the bottom of it, not just for their peace of mind, but for Ethan's safety and Max's comfort as well. The mystery would soon be solved, but for tonight, Michael took comfort in knowing that their faithful guardian was watching over their son with such unwavering devotion. After all, dogs often sense things long before humans could perceive them, and Max had earned their trust many times over. The following morning, Michael called the home inspection service first thing. The earliest appointment they could offer was 3 days away, which felt like an eternity given Max's continued behavior. Sarah suggested they move Ethan's crib to their bedroom temporarily, but Michael worried that might only mask whatever problem Max was trying to alert them to. Throughout the day, Max's behavior followed a peculiar pattern that Michael hadn't noticed before. During morning hours, the dog seemed perfectly relaxed in the nursery, often napping in the patch of sunlight that streamed through the window. But as afternoon approached, his demeanor would gradually shift. By 4 o'clock, Max would begin pacing between the nursery door and that mysterious corner, his anxiety building as evening drew near. Michael worked from home that day, setting up his paperwork at the small desk near the nursery. He kept detailed notes about Max's behavior, hoping to identify any triggers. The draft he'd noticed earlier seemed stronger during certain times, particularly when the afternoon sun heated the exterior wall. Being an older home, Michael reasoned, it might have structural issues that became more pronounced with temperature changes. Sarah returned from her teaching job at the usual time, carrying a small notebook where she jotted down questions for the home inspector. She'd also spoken with their elderly neighbor, Joan, who'd lived in the adjacent house for 40 years. Joan mentioned that during the last big storm, she noticed water staining on her wall, Sarah reported, the one that backs up to Ethan's nursery. That evening, as Max took his customary position by the crib, Michael brought in a stepladder to examine the corner more closely. The dog watched intently, but didn't move from his post. Using a flashlight, Michael discovered hairline cracks in the ceiling paint, spreading like a web from the corner. When he pressed his hand against the wall, he could feel a slight vibration, barely noticeable, but definitely there. Ethan slept peacefully through it all, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. The baby mobile above his crib spun lazily in the draft, creating shifting shadows on the walls. Michael noticed that Max's eyes tracked these shadows, but the dog's attention always returned to that corner, his growl deepening whenever the vibrations seemed to intensify. Sarah spent that night researching possible causes on her tablet, careful to keep her voice low as she shared her findings. "It could be anything from a loose pipe to structural settling," she whispered. "But what's bothering me is why Max only reacts in the evening. There must be something that changes as the house cools down." They decided to take turns staying up to observe the situation. During Michael's watch around midnight, he noticed something odd. The slight draft had become more pronounced, and with it came a faint sound. Not quite a whistle, but a subtle rushing noise that seemed to emanate from within the wall. Max's ears twitched at each new sound, his growl maintaining that same protective tone. Michael picked up Ethan, cradling him close as he walked the room's perimeter. When he neared the corner, Max stood and moved with them, positioning himself between them and the wall. The dog's behavior wasn't aggressive. If anything, he seemed more protective than ever, determined to stay between his family and whatever he sensed behind that wall. As Michael settled Ethan back into his crib, he felt a deep gratitude for Max's vigilance. Dogs possessed instincts and senses far sharper than humans, and Max was clearly trying to communicate something important. The home inspector's visit couldn't come soon enough, but until then, Michael took comfort in knowing their faithful companion was standing guard, his devotion to protecting Ethan never wavering. That night, as Michael finally went to bed, leaving Max at his self-appointed post, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of discovering something significant. Whatever it was, he was grateful they had Max to alert them before it became a serious problem. Sometimes, Michael reflected, it took an animal's instincts to reveal what human senses might miss. The home inspector arrived early on Thursday morning, his experienced eyes taking in Max's alertness as he entered the nursery. "Dogs can be better than any equipment we have," he commented, setting down his tool bag. "They can hear things in walls that our instruments might miss, like water moving or wood creaking under pressure." Michael explained Max's behavior pattern while Sarah held Ethan nearby. The inspector listened carefully, nodding as he began his examination. He started with basic measurements, checking the walls for plumb and the floors for level. When he reached the corner that concerned Max, his level showed a slight but noticeable tilt. "This is interesting," the inspector mused, pressing his hand against the wall. He pulled out a moisture meter and ran it along the surface. The device's reading jumped significantly near the area Max had been watching. "There's definitely elevated moisture in this section," he confirmed. "And look here." He pointed his flashlight at the baseboards, revealing a barely visible dark line. Max stayed close during the entire inspection, his eyes never leaving the corner. When the inspector tapped the wall, the dog's ears pricked forward and a low whine escaped his throat. The sound was different from his usual evening growls. More urgent, as if confirming that someone else finally noticed what he'd been trying to tell them. The inspection continued methodically, with more concerning discoveries. The inspector found that the exterior brick showed signs of water damage, likely from a failing gutter above. During heavy rains, water had been seeping into the wall cavity instead of draining properly. The vibration Michael had noticed was likely caused by water moving through deteriorating materials. The problem's getting worse because we've had such a wet spring, the inspector explained. When the sun heats the wall during the day, it causes the moisture to evaporate upward. Then in the evening, as things cool down, the moisture condenses and trickles back down. That's probably what your dog's been hearing. Sarah hugged Ethan closer, her face showing both relief at having an explanation and concern about the implications. The inspector continued his assessment, taking photographs and making detailed notes. He discovered that the problem extended into the crawl space below, where moisture had begun to affect the support structures. If this had gone unnoticed for a few more months, you could have had serious structural issues, he said gravely. The water damage would have continued to spread, potentially affecting the integrity of this entire corner of the house. Your dog probably saved you from a much bigger problem. Michael reached down to pat Max, who had finally relaxed slightly, now that others were acknowledging the threat he'd been detecting. The inspector recommended immediate repairs, emphasizing that the situation, while serious, could be fully resolved with proper attention. He provided them with a detailed report and referred them to several reputable contractors who could address both the external water issues and the internal damage. That evening, as they waited for the contractor estimates, Max maintained his vigilant position by the crib, but there was a difference in his demeanor. His growls were softer, almost as if he knew help was finally coming. Michael and Sarah moved Ethan's crib to their room temporarily, following the inspector's advice until the repairs could be completed. As Michael watched Max adjust to the new sleeping arrangement, following them to their bedroom, with one last glance at the nursery corner, he felt overwhelming gratitude for his dog's persistence. Max had detected a serious problem weeks before any human noticed, and his protective instincts had quite possibly prevented a dangerous situation from developing. Sarah sat on their bed, gently rocking Ethan. "We should get Max something special," she suggested, smiling as the dog settled onto his bed near them. "He's been trying so hard to warn us, and we finally understood." Michael agreed, thinking about how many times throughout history dogs had protected their families in ways humans didn't immediately understand. The contractor began work the following week, and what they discovered made Michael's heart race. Upon opening the wall, they found that the water damage was far more extensive than the initial inspection had revealed. The wooden support beam running through that corner had rotted significantly, and portions of the wall cavity were filled with mold. The contractor explained that the vibrations Max had been hearing were likely caused by the compromised beam shifting under the house's weight. "Your dog wasn't just warning you about water," the contractor said, shaking his head in amazement. "This beam could have given way without warning. These old houses sometimes hide their problems until it's too late." Michael watched as the workers carefully documented the damage, thinking about how many nights Max had stood guard, sensing the danger that lurked behind that wall. Sarah took time off from teaching to oversee the repairs while Michael worked. She noticed how Max's behavior changed as the work progressed. Instead of his anxious evening growling, he now watched the contractors intently following them around as they replaced the damaged materials. The workers grew fond of their four-legged supervisor, amazed at how he would perk up whenever they approached the previously troublesome corner. The local veterinarian, who had initially examined Max during their concerns, stopped by to check on him. She explained that dogs can detect subtle vibrations and sounds at frequencies far beyond human hearing. Max wasn't just hearing the water or the wood creaking, she explained. He was likely sensing the instability of the entire structure. Dogs have an incredible ability to detect when something in their environment isn't right. As the repairs continued, Michael and Sarah discovered that several other houses in their neighborhood had similar issues, though none had been caught as early as theirs. Their next-door neighbor, Joan, had her house inspected after hearing about their experience and found similar water damage beginning in her walls. The contractor explained that the unusual weather patterns had affected many homes in the area. One evening, as Michael watched the sunset through the plastic sheeting that temporarily covered the nursery wall, he noticed Max behaving differently. Instead of his usual alert stance and growling, the dog lay calmly on his bed, watching the workers clean up for the day. The visible relief in Max's demeanor confirmed what Michael had suspected. Their faithful companion finally sensed that the danger was passing. The repairs took 2 weeks to complete, during which time Ethan continued sleeping in his parents' room. Max adjusted to the temporary arrangement, though he would still make regular checks of the nursery, inspecting the contractor's progress with what seemed like approval. The workers joked that Max was their most attentive quality control inspector. Michael found himself sharing their story with other parents at the park, emphasizing the importance of paying attention to their pets' behavior. "Animals sense things we can't," he would explain, watching Max play gently with Ethan on their picnic blanket. "Sometimes their strange behavior isn't strange at all. They're trying to us something important." The community veterinary clinic even asked Michael to share their experience at a pet owner's workshop, using Max's story to illustrate how animals often detect household dangers before humans notice them. Sarah created a simple presentation including photos of the wall damage and Max's vigilant behavior, helping other families understand the importance of taking their pets' warnings seriously. As the repairs neared completion, Michael reflected on how close they had come to a potential disaster. If Max hadn't been so persistent in his warnings, if they had dismissed his behavior as simple jealousy or anxiety, the outcome could have been very different. The contractor assured them that the new support beam and waterproofing measures would prevent any similar issues in the future. Max received plenty of praise and extra treats during this time, though he seemed most content simply watching over Ethan during their daily routines. His evening growling had completely ceased, replaced by peaceful naps near the newly repaired wall. Michael often found himself pausing in the nursery doorway, grateful for the bond between his son and their perceptive protector. The day finally arrived to move Ethan's crib back into the fully repaired nursery. The walls had been repainted in the same soft yellow, the window frames freshly sealed, and new baseboards installed. The contractor had added extra waterproofing to the exterior walls and upgraded the gutter system to prevent any future water infiltration. Most importantly, the dangerous rotted beam had been replaced with a sturdy new support. Michael and Sarah watched nervously as Max entered the restored room, both wondering how he would react. The dog walked his usual patrol route, nose working carefully along the baseboards, paying special attention to the corner that had concerned him for so many weeks. After a thorough inspection, Max flopped down contentedly in his favorite spot by the window, offering no growls or signs of distress. His calm demeanor provided the final reassurance they needed. That evening, as they settled Ethan into his crib for the first time in weeks, the difference was remarkable. The room felt solid and secure, with no hint of the draft that had once stirred the baby mobile. Max assumed his usual position near the crib, but instead of standing alert and growling, he dozed peacefully, lifting his head occasionally to check on Ethan before settling back down. The local newspaper ran a small article about their experience in the home and garden section, focusing on the importance of home maintenance and pet behavior. They kept Max's photo from the article in a frame on the nursery wall, a reminder of their fortunate discovery. The contractor even started asking his clients if their pets had shown any unusual behavior around problem areas, knowing animals often noticed issues long before humans. As spring turned to summer, life settled into a new normal. Max's protective nature remained, but it showed itself in gentler ways. He would position himself between Ethan and the occasional delivery person at the door, or bark to alert them when the baby woke from naps. His evening growling never returned, though he maintained his habit of regular inspections around the house, particularly after rainstorms. Ethan grew increasingly mobile, crawling and pulling himself up on furniture. Max adapted to these changes with patient devotion, moving carefully around the exploring baby and positioning himself to prevent falls. The bond between them deepened, with Ethan often reaching for Max's fur to steady himself as he learned to stand. Sarah captured countless photos of these tender moments, marking their growing friendship. Michael found himself developing a deeper appreciation for the subtle ways animals communicate. He noticed Max's different barks, one for visitors, another for the mail carrier, and a special gentle whine reserved for when Ethan needed attention. The experience had taught them all to be more observant, to pay attention to the quiet warnings that might otherwise go unheeded. Their story spread through the neighborhood, leading several families to discover and repair similar issues in their homes. Joan, their elderly neighbor, often remarked how fortunate they were to have such an observant guardian. She would bring dog treats when she visited, telling everyone how Max had potentially saved not just his own family's home, but helped others in the community identify problems before they became dangerous. As fall approached, they celebrated Max's birthday with a special dinner. Sarah prepared his favorite meal, a bowl of plain cooked chicken with carrots, and they gave him a new bed for the nursery. Ethan, now pulling himself up and cruising along furniture, patted Max's head with growing coordination, squealing dog in his developing vocabulary. Max accepted these attentions with characteristic patience, his eyes bright with devotion. That night, as Michael did his final check before bed, he paused in the nursery doorway. Max lay on his new bed positioned so he could see both Ethan's crib and the now solid corner of the room. The dog's dedication had transformed from anxious warning to peaceful guardianship. Michael recalled those worried nights months ago when they struggled to understand Max's behavior and felt profound gratitude for their loyal companion's persistence. The repaired nursery stood as a testament to the remarkable bond between humans and animals and the importance of heeding their warnings. Max had protected their family in ways they never expected, demonstrating that sometimes the most important messages come not in words but in the patient, persistent alerts of a faithful friend. As Michael turned out the light, Max's contented sigh in the darkness seemed to say that all was finally well in his watch over his beloved family. In our daily lives, we often focus so much on what's in front of us that we forget about the invisible threats that might be lurking around us. Let this story remind us of the importance of listening, observing, and appreciating the small signals that we often overlook. If you found Max's story as thrilling and intriguing as we did, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss out on more exciting videos and unexpected tales. Join us as we continue to uncover more mysteries and fascinating stories from the world around us. Thank you for watching, and make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. See you in our next video.